Now we will be looking at the next performance management tool, which is Porter's generic strategies. You would know that in the rational planning model, there is a step called strategic options generation, so where you come up with various strategies that you want to try and consider to before you implement them. And Porter's generic strategies is one good tool and fairly straightforward at that point, and we will be looking at it now. So this is the thing. What it does is it really considers your target and the investment, right? So how much are you willing to invest, and what is your target market? So based on those two aspects, based on those two metrics, you try to come up with strategies. Essentially, it's um, where Porter identified three generic strategies through which an organization could achieve competitive advantage and optimize performance, right? So, your goal, or Porter's at least, was gaining competitive advantage over others and optimizing your performance. How? Uh, One way, of course, see why we call this generic is because it's typical, it's common, it's obvious, it's kind of commonsensical, right? There's no need to ransack your brain and think of complicated strategies or anything like that. These are very straightforward. So let's say you want to sell to everyone. You don't want to sell to a group of customers. You don't have specific types. You're trying to sell to everyone, like Coca-Cola, maybe. So you would say that your target is broad. But if you have a more focused approach, you're not trying to sell to everyone. Maybe you're trying to sell, zero or sugarless product, something, maybe a sugarless soft drink like Coca-Cola. So if that was the case, you're not trying to sell to all the beverages consumers in the world. You're only targeting those of them who do not want to consume sugar. So in such a case, you've made your target narrower. That's where the target classification lies on the x-axis here that you can see. On the other aspect, it's about cost. How much are you willing to it, because you see what happens with cost is that cost is a primary determinant for price. So depending on how much you're willing to make your average cost per product or service or unit is, your pricing can be determined based on that, because your price is a direct variable dependent on the cost. So if you're going for a lower cost, that's one option, because you're trying a different approach as opposed to a higher cost. Because if you're spending more money, it means that your concerns are elsewhere. You're thinking about quality and you're thinking about customer service, things like that. But if you're really trying to be cheap as possible, and cheap not in a bad way, but keep your costs as minimal as possible, then your story is different. You're trying to get rid of unnecessary overheads and marketing and branding and the beauty and the adorning and all of that. You try to get rid of all the unnecessary baggage, and you're trying to keep it minimal, keep it low cost, so that you cater to a certain group, or your target market. Both have merit. So what Porter did was, Porter put these together and came up with these three different major strategies called cost leadership, differentiation, and focus. That's how Porter looked at it: cost leadership, differentiation, and focus. Cost leadership and differentiation, both of them apply to you when you are trying to sell to everyone. Broad market. You're trying to sell to diverse groups of consumers. You're not targeting a particular niche. So in such a case, what you're doing is, if you want to keep your product cheap, then you're going for cost leadership, because you want to sell at the lowest possible price as possible. And by doing so, you're hoping that because your price is low, then people would come to you. So your strategy is different. On the other end, like Samsung, what happens with Samsung is that they're going with a differentiation option as opposed to cost leadership, because what Samsung does is that they have products with all ranges, and maintaining diversity and variations within product portfolios itself is a costly exercise, because you have to have different manufacturing lines. Different products have different designs, different specifications, all of that. So it's a costly exercise to try to cater to everyone. And you have the Galaxy S series, which is a high end product, to J or A or whatever, A50 or whatever, which are the more lower end products. So you have something for everyone. So still broad market, but you're differentiating your product in a way that everybody has something. High cost. The investment is quite large. So these are the two main strategies. The third is focus. Focus is when it can be low cost, it can be high cost, but you're focusing on niche market. You're not trying to sell to everyone. At that point, if you just have to take a look at a business and see if they're trying to sell to all or broad market or niche market. If they're going for a niche approach, then they are focused strategy. They have a focused strategy. Because obviously, if you want to sell to a niche, you are not going to do things or brand things or market things or push things or any of your work. You're not going to do them in a way that requires a wider envelope of consumers, because you have a particular a clear idea of who you want to sell to. So in terms of focus, you can go with cost focus or differentiation focus. That's a different matter, because with cost focus, what you're doing is you've targeted a niche and then you want to sell to that niche at the lowest possible cost, or in this case, price. But differentiation focus is you've again targeted a niche, but maybe multiple niche. And because you have several niches, or the niche that you've selected, even though exclusive, can be broken down into further elements, further segregations, that you have the opportunity to differentiate your product. Maybe minor differences, but you do still have. So in such a case, there we go. You're going with focus yet a differentiation approach. So we call those two strategies cost focus and differentiation focus, but both of those falls under the main banner of focus. So three main generic strategies: focus, cost leadership, and differentiation. Now, as far as APM is concerned, one thing that you have to be able to critically look at or critically utilize or put into play each of these strategies. And that means um, under each of them, and you do have a bit of a discussion there which you can read. In under each of them, you have to have an understanding of why the strategy would work, which is the beneficial aspect of it. So here, for example, under cost leadership, you will, if it works, it means that consumers are coming to you because it's cheap, and that means more consumers will come to you. You're selling a high volume, in which case, obviously, you are maximizing and attaining the opportunity of expanding your profits as much as possible. Lower costs acting as a barrier to entry and reducing competition. So that's another benefit of cost leadership, because you're actually making it difficult for other people to enter the market, because you're already the cost leader. And of course, a new entrant would find it very difficult to match that kind of cost, because you wouldn't really consider a cost leadership strategy unless you do have economies of scale and kind of benefits of having very sustainable relationships with your suppliers, long-term relationships, maybe good financial backing, and good working capital management, etc., so that you can really manage and keep the costs low. However, you have to understand that there are risks with any strategy. Even this comes with its own risks. And one of the biggest risks is that this is a sort of ultimate game. You're playing at the edge, because there is really no fallback. Right? If you lose the cost leadership position, you've stretched yourself so thin that to keep the costs low, you've kept your margins pretty low, because bringing the price down, that of course you have room. It's an opportunity. It's something that you can do, you can consider. But bring the price up, that doesn't, you especially in a situation where you've gotten the market used to buying from you for a long period of time at a certain price, and then you want to put the price up, especially in a situation where you're trying to sell to the broader market under cost leadership, which is what you would generally try to do. things wouldn't really work well in your favor. So there are challenges and there are risks like that. In addition to that, you have to understand that each of these strategies, just because you want to, you can't really do it. You have to have certain preconditions met, and those some of those conditions, if not the main ones, are included in here in the text, which you can take a look at. For example, a cost leadership strategy cannot really be attained unless you do have the financial prowess behind it. You have the right people, you have mass economies of scale, mass economies of scope, massive experience, very strong relationships with your suppliers, good working capital management, long term credit receivable periods. In terms of improvements you can make, the opportunity to further expand, because uh, if you are going for a cost leadership strategy, it's also someone sensible or someone intelligent, how they would do it is by making sure that they do, despite the fact that they are the cost leader, they would continuously aspire to come up with new methods, new processes to bring the cost further down. And they would do it even though they don't bring the price. As long as the price is the lowest in the market, they're safe. They would be considered as the cost leader. But if they, while doing that, if they have Kaizen or 5S or whatever and lean, and they have internally, without the market knowing, without the competitors knowing, let's say a product cost $5, and then they've been selling it for $8, and that's the cost leader status. $8 is the consumer's price. Consumer knows that this is the cheapest price you can buy this product for, and you've been producing it for 5. But without the customer knowing, without competitors knowing, what you've done is you've managed to bring it down to 4. So you can actually keep that as a safety margin. You can keep that $1 as a safety margin and operate at 8 until a threat appears, or until you decide that it's best that I can transfer the benefit of the reduced cost further. So you hold on to that benefit. You make that $1 extra for as long as you can, and whatever point, whenever you see maybe a competitor has finally managed to sell it to 8 or something like that, the moment you see that, you bring the cost down. You get the maximum benefit, and you bring the cost down to, or price down to 7, because now you're manufacturing at 4. So it's also continuous improvement. In product design stage, we learn it in TQM as well. So you have all these different aspects to look at. The risks are important. Each of those strategies have their own risks. The prerequisites are important. The conditions that must be fulfilled for you to make that decision in a sensible and in a smart way. And in addition to that, you have to understand that there are significant benefits for each of those strategies as well. So that's what Porter explained here. You should definitely take a look at each of these. And on that note, we are wrapping up those 5 SWOT best Porter's 5 forces, BCG matrix, and Porter's generic strategies. I'll see you in a different video. Thank you so much.